Now here's another little story from the Rebel of the Gap series. Something my dad told me when he was growing up. He always said if he didn't have no bad luck, he'd have no luck at all. Now this you're looking at is Cumberland Gap. It's where 3 states come together: Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And here in the foreground is a little community just outside of Cumberland Gap called Tipple. This is where the little Rebel of the Gap grew up at, back in the 30s. And here's a picture looking back towards the Cumberland Gap from Tipple. Just a little poor community back in them days. Now he lived in a little house like this in Tipple with 10 brothers and sisters. And they lived hard in them days. And he done all he could to help the family, working gardens, hunting for furs, whatever he had to do to bring something home for a living. And he grew up at the base of this old Cumberland mountain. This is downtown Cumberland Gap. There he is when he was first starting in school. Old pictures. There's the one you see all the time in the chapter. And he's coming of age. He's just becoming into teenager years. This is another story that he shared with me. Now when he always had a knack for tinkering, cobbling, fixing things, making things. Here he is with his brothers on an old wagon with Model T wheels. I'm surprised he didn't take that down Cumberland Mountain. But he fixed up an old bicycle, fixed it up good, and drove it around in the Gap, running errands, whatever he had to do around the farm. And he took it over to Minnesboro one day, over the mountain. There's a story on that. Took it down the mountain, lost his sprocket chain, and rode it all the way down the mountain with no brakes. And this is about what the roads looked like at that time. This is on the Virginia side of Cumberland Gap, next to the old Cudjoe's Cave. So much history here passed through here over the years. And the sad thing is, his dad, my grandfather, he died in '48. He was a logger. He stayed in the logging woods all the time. His appendix ruptured on him, and time they got him out to the hospital, there's nothing they could do for him. So he died. Sad time. I never met him. But his brothers and sisters, they all helped each other and helped their mother. And they made it. But it was a hard time. And he filled with his brothers and friends. He got to working. He was so good at this knack of working on stuff. Working on old cars. He'd help out around garages and everything. And he was good at it. But this is about the time of the Korean War started. And a couple of his brothers, they went off to the Army. One went to the Air Force. And one went to the Marines. And one of his brothers that went to the Marines left him his car to take care of. The old 49 Ford. I guess that's where he loved them old Fords. And he fooled around Minnesboro as he become up in the middle, late teenager years, working around gas stations, working on garages and cars way before he could become a coal miner. Here he is working in an old gas station. He liked doing that, but there wasn't no money in it. Wasn't no money in it. But he got to know some friends, having friends, and loved old cars. They'd go to these dirt races all they could around the area. watch these old cars run. They even got to fixing them themselves. His friends, he got to knowing people at these junkyards. They go to these old junkyards, and they get an old car for practically nothing, piece it together, enough to ride around and try to race with. Just how young boys was. Now, he had all kinds of old cars, he said, when he was young, fixing them up. But he loved an old Ford better than anything. And they flew around Minnesboro doing odd jobs, working gas stations, working on people's cars, just trying to make a living. Didn't make $5 or $10 a week in them days. And they'd race across the mountain here back towards Gabler's Gap, towards home. Every chance they could, they loved to race. Young boys. And the law knowed them and pulled them over a lot and warned them and warned them. So they know that they could only be warned so much. So they had to quit racing across that mountain. But that didn't stop them. Here's a little place on Cumberland Mountain years ago, nobody could probably remember, called Indian Rock Cafe. A little old honky-tonk and stuff. And boys would get together there, and they'd go back into the country there, a gang of them, and they'd go back off the old roads back in the mountains where they could race the cars and nobody'd bother them. And he figured out real quick, there's only so many places you can go with these old cars on these back roads. They ain't four-wheel drive. But they raced these old strip jobs, these old mining roads, back roads when they could. Just a bunch of friends. Win $1 here and there just among friends. Now he took care of his brother's car awful well. He never would race either. But his brother finally gave it to him. He loved that. Now he told me a story once here. Most of you won't know that's watching this video, but if you're a local area, you know Cumberland Gap, you know around this area, you'll know Fondue Mountain. And he told me a story once, after they raced that night going up the mountain, they was coming back down and he lost his brakes. And there used to be a big old rock here going down into this curve in Cumberland Gap. Big old rock, hung out. When he lost his brakes, he kind of rode the ditch line down through there, and he couldn't slow it down enough for nothing, because they like to fly anyway. So he knowed he had that hairpin curve coming up, you see, right here on this map. So he hit that rock and destroyed that car. And that rock I can remember seeing hit all my years of driving and growing up and working in the mines, crossing that mountain. And many of you do, you know what I'm talking about. Big old rock had hung out from the bank there, close to the road. And he cracked it. And I noticed that crack got wider and wider over here. Well, I went back looking for it. It's no longer there. I guess the State Highway Department finally cleaned all that up and that rock, and they got rid of it too. But it stayed there for 60, 70 years. But it's gone now. Now this ain't the actual car. This is what he said it looked like. Destroyed that car. Old car he raced with. Destroyed it. And he used to tell me, he wrecked these old cars. He said you tumble over side to side or something like that, you could get over that. But when you turn head over end about 3 times, it usually takes you about 3 or 4 days to get over that one. I thought that was awful fun. But he'd wreck his cars all the time. No seatbelt, no airbags in them days. It's just hard metal. Well, they just go back in the junkyard, get him another old junker, motor out of one or parts out of another, get it running. That's the way it was. No insurance back in them days, no nothing. And they loved his back road. Just old wild young country boys. Well, all changed one day though. He come into a little old restaurant there from lunch, eating one of these gas stations, and met a coal miner's daughter. That changed his life. He didn't know it, but it changed his life forever. And they were inseparable. It wasn't long they was married. The old boy in the Gap, he grew up to be a man, but he had so many stories. And the old car that he got from his brother, he told me he traded it off when he got married. But I don't know what happened to it. I can only hope that it's sitting somewhere rusting away like this, not crushed and gone. So I hope you enjoy these little stories. The next little story here is, like I said, he had no bad luck, he'd have no luck at all. A little funny story when he went to get married. He had a bad time at that. So I want to thank y'all for watching. God bless, and I'll see you next time.